Hello, welcome to the narrated PowerPoint for the Integumentary system. I want to go over some of the major issues that I feel are important for you to remember about this system. First of all, the functions. You can read this, but it is important to reiterate. Our skin protects us from water loss, from the entrance of microbes, which are, of course, microscopic, possible pathogenic organisms, bacteria, viruses, etc. If you have intact skin, then those microbes will not enter. If you notice, you generally receive infections along a cut of your skin where the epithelial layers have been compromised. And also protects us from ultraviolet light with the melanin that is produced, and we'll get back to that later. The skin is actually the largest organ in our body. The integument itself is the largest organ in our body, and it is very important in helping us to sense cold, hot, or in other words, temperature, and pain and pressure. And we'll take a look at the nerve receptors that are involved in those. Also, the skin is very important for temperature regulation, and in that sense, it helps us maintain homeostasis. We also excrete a small amount of waste from our skin in our sweat and so forth. And the skin also produces vitamin D and requires ultraviolet light to stimulate that production. The skin is, as I mentioned, the largest organ in our body, and it weighs about 12 pounds. We can determine body fat amount in the skin, or in the body, by simply doing a pinch test of our skin. There are other more accurate ways, but this is a good overall general way to do that. The skin is divided into two main regions, the epidermis and the dermis. Now, of course, the integumentary system includes the skin and the accessory structures, including glands and nerve fibers, and we'll get to that in just a few moments. Here is a diagram of the skin showing you the layers. Here is the epidermis pulled off, and here is the dermis. Notice there is a junction between the epidermis and the dermis via the dermal papilla. If you want to interlace your fingers, you'll have a good idea of how the dermis and the epidermis are, let's say, joined together. And I'm not really being facetious here, but if you didn't have the dermal papilla, among other things, imagine your epidermis just kind of sliding around on your dermis. Not a pretty thought. All right. This is an actual microgram showing you the duct of a sweat gland as it proceeds to the exterior of the epidermis. Let's move on. The epidermis is the most superficial or exterior layer of the skin, so it's in contact with the outside. And we haven't talked about different types of tissue, so don't worry about this. It does tell you it's composed of a certain type of epithelial tissue, a certain type of cell. I do want to mention that as our skin cells proceed towards the exterior of our body, a process called keratinization, and we can think of it as kind of a hardening of the cells, occurs. This process allows the new cells that are being produced at the base of the epidermis to push the old cells to the surface. And as these cells move towards the surface, they are more and more replace their contents. Their cytoplasm is replaced by a protein called keratin, and this is a protective protein. The cells at the exterior of your epidermis are actually, for all intents and purposes, dead cells. They have been, all of their cellular material has been replaced by keratin. So it takes about 40 to 56 days for a cell that began at the basal layer to proceed to the exterior and then actually be sloughed off. So we could say, in a sense, that within 40 to 56 days, you essentially have pretty much new skin. Our skin is always revitalizing. The epidermis contains several layers, and again, I'm not going to belabor this too much. The exterior layer is called the stratum corneum, or the keratinized layer. It is the outermost layer. It has 20 to 30 layers of actual dead cells that are filled with keratin. It's very protective. It accounts for 75% of the thickness of our epidermis. The stratum basal is the basement layer. This is where the new cells are dividing and being produced. The dermis is the more deep layer of our skin, of our integument. It is comprised of dense connective tissue. There are collagen and elastic fibers. Both of these are proteins, and interestingly enough, as we age, the elastic fibers are replaced by more collagen. The elastic fibers tend to not reproduce as well as we age. Hence, some of us, and you can't see me as I'm doing this, some of us don't have the elasticity of our skin, and perhaps we could say our skin sags, but let's not go there. Our skin also contains fibroblasts, which produce the new fibers, nerve endings, smooth muscle, glands, blood vessels, and hair follicles. All right, the layers of the dermis, the papillary layer, which you saw is kind of those finger-like projections. We saw that as I showed you the connection between the dermis and the epidermis. Okay, you can read about this and review it as much as you like. So again, the epidermis and the dermis with the papillary layer consisting of dermal papilla, which literally mean little bumps, and some more diagrams to show you what this looks like. The hypodermis, hypo means below. The hypodermis is located below the dermis, and it attaches the skin to the underlying muscle and bone. It is not actually part of the integument itself. It provides the foundation. It contains many blood vessels. It also contains about 1/2 of our body's fat in a normal person who is not otherwise obese. All right, some of the, let's say, accessory structures which make up the integumentary system. Remember, a system consists of more than one organ. So the integument, of course, is the major organ of the integumentary system, but the accessory structures include sebaceous or oil-secreting glands, hair and hair follicles, a muscle called the erector pili muscle, which is a smooth muscle which actually allows the hair follicles to stand on end. When this smooth muscle contracts, the hair will stand on end. And if we were more hirsute or more hairy animals, like some of our primate predecessors, then that standing up of the hair and packing it essentially closer together would also help in temperature regulation. Let's move on. Skin color and variations is determined by pigments, genetics, blood circulation, and the thickness of the stratum corneum. And actually, whether you are dark-skinned or light-skinned, you have the same number of melanocytes as other, let's say, races of people. It is how active the melanocytes are and how much melanin, or the dark pigment, that they produce. That's all it is. That's all the differences are. And when you think about where different races of people originated, it makes sense for certain people to have more pigmentation in their skin than for others. Northern climates, less pigmentation. Equatorial climates, more pigmentation. All right, so it is produced, skin pigments are melanin produced by melanocytes, and you can see the color ranges. And again, you can review this at your own leisure. Albinism is the absence of melanin, and it not only produces a very pale, let's say, colorless skin, but also very light colored eyes and very light colored hair. This is a little bit of detail of how melanosomes, which are the bodies that actually contain the melanin, are produced and then taken up actually by these cells of our epithelium, of our epithelial tissue. So they're produced in melanocytes. A cyte is a cell, and then transferred, actually taken up by our epithelial cells so that the epithelial cells become pigmented. All right, you can tell a bit about disease from different skin color. Please read about this. Very important diagnostically, jaundice shows yellowing of the skin and more often than not indicates liver disease. Addison's disease produces a bronzing of the skin and so forth. All right, this just shows you a hair follicle. I'm not going to belabor that except to show you that there are sebaceous oil secreting glands associated with every hair follicle and also the erector pili muscle. You can read about these. Notice I just mentioned sebaceous gland. There are two types of sweat glands, eccrine, which are all over the body, and they produce water and salt secretions. Apocrine open only into hair follicles and only found in armpits and genitalia. They produce a more thick, viscous secretion, and they are odoriferous. Vitamin D production happens in our skin, and this tells you a little bit about it. So we need ultraviolet to activate the precursors to vitamin D. And vitamin D does have important functions for bone health. Our skin is also involved in temperature regulation, and you've all experienced that. If you are hot, your blood vessels close to the skin will constrict and reduce blood flow, or I'm sorry, to heat the body. If you are cold, our blood vessels will constrict and reduce blood flow. If you are hot, your blood vessels will dilate to allow blood flow and therefore cool the body. Therefore, you may appear, or parts of your body may appear red when you are overheated. Parts of your body may appear bluish when you are cold because of lack of blood flow. This shows you diagrammatically the dilation of capillaries close to the surface of the skin to release heat and the constriction of capillaries close to the skin to conserve heat. All right, last topic, well, almost the last topic, is classification of burns. Take a look at the difference between first, second, and third degree burns. There's also a section in your book about these. Please read that. We call a third degree burn a full thickness burn because it does go through all the layers of the skin, including the hypodermis down to the muscle. Skin cancer is the most common cancer. It is mainly caused by UV light exposure. So we need some UV light to activate and produce vitamin D, but we also need to protect ourselves from an overabundance. This tells you the type of skin cancers. Malignant melanoma is the least common but the most deadly. And here's a diagram showing you what these cancers may look like. Don't self-diagnose. If you feel that you or a loved one has one of these types of disturbances, let's say lesions on the skin, consult your doctor, consult your health professional. Don't take a chance. All right, that is an overview of the skin, or I should say of the entire integumentary system, the skin and its accessory structures, a little bit about it. Read your book, study the diagrams that I have included in your objectives and reading assignments, and feel free to ask me any questions by Moodle messaging, and watch this as often as you like. Okay, enjoy.